Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, on this show, we often talk about how the events of the last 18 months have changed our world. But today, I want to explore the ways that it has accelerated digital change and technological change in the financial services industry. Because banks did have to rapidly adjust in 2020, considering the use of cash dropped off a cliff and mobile banking grew by 13%, and physical branches were literally forced to close overnight. And as lockdowns were imposed without warning, some of the world's oldest and most cautious organisations were suddenly forced to change. Do nothing, and they would face a mass customer exodus. So a company called HCL, which you may remember on, I think, way back on episode 644, they played a big part in the digital transformation of Man United. But that's just a very small part of the kind of work that they do, because they also manage IT for the likes of Deutsche Bank, Ing, and Metro Bank, and so many others. So today I've invited Rahul Singh from HCL to explore this topic with me and learn what was going on behind the scenes and how that industry was forced to adapt to technological change at a rapid speed. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to London, where we are about to get this conversation started. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, hi Neil. This is Rahul Singh. I'm the president for financial services at HCL, and HCL is, a global outsourcing firm, and we work on digital agendas of our customer.
Now, a question I always like to start by asking my guests is, what is your origin story? Can you remember where your passion for technology came from and what put you on the path that you're on today? Because I think we've all got one of those stories, haven't we?
Yeah, Neil, mine is a very long story. I joined the workforce almost 35 years back. I worked in Citibank in a global role many years back. But I think the defining moment for me was, we formed a company called eServe, where I was the founder and, the CEO of the company. Somewhere in the middle 97, 98, that time period, it was a financial services outsourcing firm and very unique in its space because, while outsourcing was happening, we focused our firm to the financial services sector globally. And, because I was in Citibank for many years, so banking came naturally to me. And the company was also funded by Citibank, so it was kind of linked to the parent organization. That company grew many years. I ran it for about 12 years, at which point of time we sold the company. Citibank sold the company. And I joined HCL Technologies around about the same time. So that's how I landed up in the technology side. Of course, moved from banking to technology, but traversing through eServe, which was a global outsourcing firm for financial services.
I love how those worlds of banking and technology collided for you. And that path, like you said, led to HCL Technologies. And we have spoken to quite a few people from HCL in the past few years. But for new listeners to the show, can you tell them a little bit more about the kind of problems that you're solving for your customers?
Yeah, sure. So HCL Technologies is a global technology firm. And, we, have been in existence in various forms across many years. We were founded way back in 1976, as HCL. But we became HCL Technologies, just about 20 years back, just around about, 2000. And, being a global technology firm, we work towards reimagining the customer's digital agenda, because these days, whether it's banking or you're in any other sector in the industry, our businesses are being driven by digitization agendas, and HCL enables our clients to reimagine their business and become ready and fit for the digital age. So we do that across the globe. We've got customers in various geographies. We do have our people whom we call as ideapreneurs spread across the globe. And we service customers in multiple geographies.
And one of the reasons I was excited to get you on the podcast today is we have seen an explosion in remote working with existing ways of working and the obvious privacy and security concerns that come along with that. And as a result of that, banking has been, some would argue, slow to adapt to remote working in comparison to other industries. However, the pandemic has made it a necessity now, and banks had to find a way to enable people to work remotely, but without damaging the customer experience. So can you expand on these key areas that banking has been forced to address over the last 18 months?
Yes, absolutely. Of course, remote working is now very much a part of life, and most industries have adopted to that very well. Banking, has been technologically quite adept as an industry. Technology has always been there in banking. However, banking has traditionally been a brick and mortar business. And if you go back to reasons why banks existed, is because people put money in banks, right? And you held your deposits there, and so on and so forth. So trust has always been a very key requirement for banking systems to offer their clients. And therefore, the banks were always built on a brick and mortar model. So you went to a branch, you met the branch manager, or you did your transactions as on the teller. And therefore, the change of customer behavior, was also a very important driver, because it was difficult for moving customers, from a brick and mortar experience to an online experience. So I think it went two ways. One is, as 18 months back when COVID happened, it became very difficult for people to move across, go to the branches, and so on and so forth. At the same time, banks, because of the fact that they were dealing with data, currency, cash, security was very critical. They had been a little slow in terms of the whole remote work from home. Although technology allowed it to happen, just the behavior was not allowing it to happen. But of course, the event happened about 18 months back, when both parties, which is the bank themselves, had to work from home, primarily because the branches had to be closed, and the consumers, they themselves also had to transact remotely because they couldn't also go out. And therefore, that accelerated the whole change. So, because I've been following this industry, would like to mention here that it is not that they were not ready technologically. I think they had, a lot of technology investments, especially the big high street banks, etc., had always invested in technology to be able to work from home. However, the pivot or the change agent was the crisis, the COVID pandemic, which forced the change to happen at a faster pace. And therefore, I would say that there was some kind of a learning and relearning to be done as to how do you work remote. What collaborative tools do you have to put in place? How do you make sure security happens? Largely the whole work from home had to be quote unquote tested and laid out from both the banks and consumers' point of view at that point of time. So again, it's not that the technology was not there. Technology was always there in banks. But it had to be triggered, and the trigger was the pandemic, and I think that's what forced them to change. And of course, the minute work from home became important, very soon banks were able to make their security and other features enabled. And it is firms like HCL, because we have large offering which we call as fluid workplace solutions, which enables our clients to then take advantage of new ways of working from home. Especially from a security and from a compliance perspective, which we've enabled a lot of our global banks to now essentially work from home and deliver services to their customers.
So many great points there. And I think that pivoting and changing of behaviors and attitudes as well is also something that's been huge for consumers, because if we look back at things through, let's say, paying through your phone, that used to be a nice to have, but all that changed with the pandemic, and it meant to avoid unnecessary physical contact, we maybe ditched chip and pin card machines, we used our phone, used our smartwatches, etc., which pretty much forced the banks to speed up mobile payment rollouts and ensure mobile apps were reliable. But as consumers, they don't necessarily think about all that work that goes on behind the scenes to deliver that. So can you tell me a little bit more about how banks' contactless and phone payment options had to mature so much quicker than initially planned, and anything else that you observed during this time?
Yes, absolutely. I think, payments, had already started becoming, I would say contactless and touchless. So you could kind of tap your way through lots of services and lots of shopping and even the utilities, etc., like the tubes. But what I think has happened is that, the entire, it's beyond payments, which has now become contactless, right? So, for example, I would always call it like an everything banking can be done virtually, right? So, for example, you can open accounts virtually today. You can do your KYC virtually. There are banks which are now working towards, what they call as contactless or remote, mortgages. You can take loans, without, kind of having physical paper. And a whole lot of things. If you go down the insurance side, insurance claims can be now filed remotely. So the whole experience of what was originally started off as contactless payments is now available through a breadth of financial services products and banking products. And again, going back to change of behaviors and change of working, etc. The trigger, which was COVID about 18 months back, both sides, the providers like the banks and the users like consumers like you and me, the change on both sides has made this model happen. So as you go into the future, you will really see more and more of that happening. But now that the people have got used to this way of banking, completely moving out from brick and mortar to almost completely digital banking, I think you will see many, many more products being offered by the banks, which will be more remote, more digital, and it'll be almost banking everywhere, all around us. That's the way it'll go in the future.
And for obvious reasons, financial services were the slowest or one of the slowest industries to adopt public cloud, especially with regulations and restrictions keeping financial services out of this fast lane. But it feels that banks have had to dramatically speed things up when they suddenly had large remote workforces to support, requiring that computer capacity beyond the current capabilities of many existing on-premise or private cloud systems. So can you share any insights around that area too, around the public cloud?
Right. So, the public cloud is here to stay. If you look at it more from the financial institutions and banks perspective, I would say that they were the late adopters of this change. Primarily because, going back to the fact that, banking has always been seen as a secure business, very compliant business, very regulated business. People, and I would say both the regulators and the banks themselves were a little wary whether, they would be able to store people's records, which are private and personal, on the public cloud at the same security that they could do on-prem, which is within their own offices. So that fear, has been one of the reasons why the adaptation of public cloud has been little slow in financial institutions historically. However, it's been changing pretty rapidly now because I think people, the banking system specifically, the people who are responsible for the cloud and other are realizing that the cloud is more than just it's more than just convenience of storing of data. There is a lot of improvement, a lot of innovation, a lot of AI, etc. Availability of off-the-shelf, what people, the entire PaaS revolution that is taking place, availability of more products on the cloud, which the banking system can make use of. And as the security in public cloud is improving, as the compliance requirements are getting more and more addressed, the adoption of public cloud is increasing in the financial services world. At the same time, it will take time. So I see the emergence of this whole hybrid cloud model, where banks will have part of their workloads and data on the cloud, and then they'll continue to have a part of their workloads and data on-prem, and a hybrid cloud kind of environment will exist, which will enable the banks to then move into the public cloud in a more gradual, controlled manner, so they can take advantage of the cloud. But since it will take a little bit more time, a hybrid cloud environment is where they will be able to get the benefits over the next couple of years, for sure, next 4 to 5 years, before they can move everything to the cloud.
And we've talked about just how much has changed over the last 18 months from the consumer, banking and business point of view. But I'm curious, how have you seen the pandemic accelerate digital change in the financial service industry? Is there anything else that you've seen there that has caught your attention?
Yes, essentially, if you look at it on a macro basis, the entire world is increasingly connected. And I would say they are digitally connected, right? So it's not that they're connected physically, but they're digitally connected. So once the world gets digitally connected, businesses start operating in that digitally connected world. And as businesses operate in the digitally connected world, banking gets also starts coming onto the digitally connected world. So what we are seeing, is the emergence of new business models. I think innovative business models, with the financial services industry is, but how do you create this whole banking experience in the digitally connected world? So you see these, several fintech, banks, neobanks, etc., get set up, which are focused a lot on customer experience. So they're offering the banking service, right? The same banking service which was offered to a customer or a consumer on in a brick and mortar world is now being almost completely offered in the virtual world or in the digitally connected world. And therefore new business models are now taking shape in that connected world. I'll give you some examples of that. So for example, when it comes to taking loans, you would have seen that e-commerce platforms, now offer loan as you buy, right? As you buy a product, you get immediate alerts about, hey, you are a good consumer or good customer, and we can offer a loan for you, right? So traditionally, if you go back like many years back, that would not have happened. Many years back, you would have had to go and get your transaction done, submit papers and so on and so forth. But now it happens at the click of a button. Perhaps it just happens side by side when you are experiencing a regular transaction. So the point here is that as the consumers get more digitally connected, businesses get digitally connected, and banking services start getting offered in that digitally connected world. And therefore the new business models which we are seeing emerging, I give you an example of that. And there are several more. For example, you can go to a coffee shop next time and you can pick up your choice coffee, and the payment of that happens just behind the scene. You don't even have to take out your card, because most probably the coffee shop knows who you are and they know your choice brand, and they just offer it to you, and you still get charged on your account. Right, so convenience will start happening in a almost irreversible manner in the new digital world, and financial services will adopt to that at the same pace. And while I give you examples only of banking, the same thing is also in insurance, right? Insurance. For example, you would have again noticed that when you take a trip, you travel. You normally get insurance at the click of a button. You just press the button and you get insurance, on your travel, right? So these kind of conveniences will happen, and it will become almost like a virtual financial services around us, and which will be good for the well-being of community and people in general, because financial services, inclusion of financial services across a larger spectrum of users, is always good. Global statistics are that 20 to 25% of the world is underbanked, which means they don't have the advantages of formal banking, and certainly they don't have the advantages of formal insurance. So these conveniences, as they come around us, will also enable huge penetration of financial services, and the benefit of financial services will go down, through the whole inclusion, across the globe.
And as we record the podcast today, there is a lot of news around how quickly the economy's bouncing back, quicker than a lot expected. And one of the reasons why the supply chain is struggling at the moment because of huge, unprecedented demand. So I'm curious, as we look forward, is anything that excites you about the road ahead as once again things begin to change?
Yes, the supply chain, and one hears about problems which are even beyond supply chain, like electricity problems and all, in large countries, economies, etc. Kind of unexpected. It's the good and bad. That's the way I see it. The good part is it does show that the recovery is happening very fast. And of course the bad part is that we were not prepared for the recovery at this pace. But looking at the brighter side, at the end of the tunnel. The pickup of global economy, I think, augurs well for the financial system. And the good part is that the last 18 months, the pace at which the digital adoption in financial industry has increased, will only make it better for the future, because with digitization comes not only better convenience from a consumer's perspective, but also improved productivity. So the banks are able to do their transactions faster. Their costs have come down significantly. As the digital adoption has increased, I would think long-term, one-time correction, which would have otherwise have taken 5-6 years for the industry to do, has happened in a small span of time. So it will improve overall productivity, overall experience, and I think good for the industry as a whole. So that's the road ahead. I think there's no reverse to the change. As I mentioned earlier, we are already seeing emergence of new business models, business innovation taking place around the entire digital banking and experience, which I think will be good for the consumer. And the good part, as I mentioned earlier, is that as the adaptation of cloud and security around that, etc., improves, I think overall from a regulatory point of view as well, I think the 18 months has been a good kind of a booster shot, to change, which would otherwise have taken much longer to happen.
Exciting times ahead, it seems. And before I let you go, I want to have a bit of fun with you. We started talking about your origin story, and a question I always like to finish the podcast with is asking my guests if there was a song or piece of music that has inspired them throughout their career, just helps them get their head in the zone. Do you have a song and story you can share with us, and we'll add that song to our Spotify playlist?
That's pretty neat. I've always liked inspirational songs, which kind of inspire, a little bit, and there's one which goes back many years. I would call it a timeless classic. It's from the Beatles, We Can Work It Out,
Yes.
old Paul McCartney, John Lennon, song, which I've always felt, very motivational. There's this nice para in the middle, which talks about that life is short and there's no time for fussing and fighting. And how true, even today, 50 years since it was written and sung, still very relevant. So it's one of my most motivational and favorite songs the years.
Wow, what a great choice there. And something that we could all hear right now, especially with so much polarization and division everywhere. We can work it out, man. If only we could get everybody to sit down and listen to that record. But before I let you go, for anyone wanting to find out more about HCL Technologies or any of the topics we've covered today, or contact your team, what's the best starting point?
Well, you can search out HCL on the web, and you can follow several of our leaders. They are on Twitter. I'm on at Rahul Singh 50, but several of my colleagues are also on Twitter, and so is HCL.
I feel like we've covered a lot of ground in a small amount of time today, but I cannot thank you enough for coming on, talking about some of the challenges that we've all seen and how it's affecting both the consumers and the banking industry, and how it's going to continue to evolve. And it's all about that flexibility that we're all searching for now. But thank you so much for sharing that, along with your very personal story and a great song to boot. So thank you for sharing that with me today.
Thank you.
One of the reasons I was excited to get Rahul on the podcast today was because of how well positioned he is with this unique insight of industry challenges faced during the pandemic. And it was great hearing his experiences, his insights. And I cannot thank him enough for taking the time to explore those three big digital shifts that have occurred within the financial services industry. But over to you. Obviously, I've seen things. Rahul has shared his expertise and insights and what he's observed. What about you and your industry? I'd love to hear from you. So please email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram @Neil C. Hughes, and my website is techblogwriter.co.uk. And one final request: in that ongoing battle against the algorithms, which will determine which new listeners manage to find this podcast, if you could rate and review the show if you've enjoyed it, I'd really appreciate it. If you didn't enjoy it, maybe hold back on that review. I'm only joking. Okay, well, thank you so much for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.